Contemporary Issues in Bioscience, organized by Department of Biochemistry and Microbiology, AJ College of Science and Technology. Now I invite Dr. Biju C. Matthew, Professor and Head, Department of Biochemistry and Microbiology, PG Division, for his introductory remarks.
Good morning, everyone. Hope I'm audible. Is it clear?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Clear. You can proceed.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Actually, it is indeed a great pleasure to welcome all of you to this third talk in a series of webinar lectures on contemporary issues in biosciences, being organized by the Department of Biochemistry and Microbiology, AJ College of Science and Technology, Thonakem. And as you are aware, today's topic, the topic of today's talk is actually microbes and infectious diseases, major milestones and recent trends. To be delivered by Dr. Sarika AR, scientist, Kerala State Biotechnology Commission, Sivaji. In the light of the current COVID-19 pandemic, I think the topic becomes extremely relevant. Before the formal introduction of the speaker, as usual, I would like to say a few lines as an introduction to this particular topic, to this talk. Yesterday, I happened to read an article. Actually, it was an interview given to a scientific journal by one of the world's most respected scientists, the 2001 Nobel laureate in Physiology of Medicine, who shared the Nobel Prize, Sir Paul Nurse. Paul Nurse is one of the most respected scientists in the world, as I said earlier, the 2001 Nobel laureate, and at present director of the world-renowned Francis Crick Research Institute. So the question was asked to he's actually in the process of writing a book. The title of the book is "What is Life? Understanding Biology in 5 Steps." Actually, he was asked the question, how do you define life? How do you define life? Actually, it was in context of the pandemic. And how do you define life? That was a question which was asked to him. Actually, it's a subject of such gravity. But he surprisingly gave a very short and simple answer. How do you define life? According to him, 3 principles define life. The article can be seen on the net. A particular interview by Nobel laureate Paul Nurse. 3 principles define life. 1, a living thing must be able to evolve, developing through natural selection in the ongoing competition that ensures survival of the fittest. I repeat, that ensures survival of the fittest. 2, separate but connected. It must be separate from its environment, but connected to it, relying on it for food and other resources. Point number 2. Number 3, living entities must have the genes and other equipment needed to maintain themselves, grow, and reproduce. Now he says these are the 3 principles which define life. Any entity which operates according to all these 3 of them can be deemed to be alive, operating with a purpose. I repeat, deemed to be alive, operating with a purpose. To cut short, all life is dependent on other forms of life. Life on this planet is highly interacting. Life on this planet is highly interacting with viruses at one end of the spectrum and photosynthesizing bacteria at the other end of the spectrum. And we are in the middle, says Paul Nurse. Now the concept comes, it's again coming on survival of the fittest. How do we survive? We do have the machinery, we are interacting, we are surviving. As Professor, I again repeat, one of the late Professor Janice Mower Cube, who has written one of the finest textbooks in immunology. She's no more died at a very young age. I have done some research on this particular scientist, and I have published an article which is actually appearing in the, is already been put up in the CSIR, one of the CSIR publications. I happened to talk to some of our students through mail, she had taught. And Huber always used to start the introductory lecture by saying, survival is the foremost instinct of all living organisms. Everybody wants to survive, be it a virus, bacteria, protozoa, helminth, human, plant, everything. Now we are facing threats, and we have developed a very superb immune system. It's protecting us. The different arms of the immune system, the properties of the immune system, whether it's specificity, whether it's diversity, whether it's memory, of all, I think, specialization. The immune system fights different pathogens in a very, very different manner. Whether it's the adaptive humoral, whether it's innate or adaptive humoral cell mediator, it's actually doing a fine job. It also has developed a lot of tolerance. Last talk we had seen on commensal microbes, a lot of tolerance it has developed. It is using this tolerance to, to ignore many of these commensal microbes. Now the question which has come up is, as I said, is now these pandemics are hitting us. These epidemics and these pandemics are actually coming after us. Be it epidemic, smallpox, influenza, measles, encephalitis, cholera. I think the speakers go to the pandemic, the Great Black Death, Spanish flu, and the present COVID-19. Actually, what do they teach us? What do they teach us? What are the lessons to be learned from this pandemic? I think this is what is actually becoming very, very relevant, especially when it comes to developing a drug, antiviral drug or antibacterial drug, or a vaccine, or even a monoclonal antibody. So with these few words, I think today's topic is actually going to be extremely relevant, because the speaker is actually going to speak on, she's going to take a look at what is called microbes and infectious diseases, major milestones and recent threats. Now coming to our distinguished speaker today, Dr. Sarika A.R. is a scientist at the Kerala Biotechnology Commission, Trivandrum. Since 2013, she has a PhD in microbiology with the prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru Memorial Doctoral Fellowship. I must say, Dr. Sarika is also, it's good to have Dr. Sarika, because she's not just involved in research, but also in education and awareness program, promoting biotechnology, skill development, and research. She has a number of publications in international journals. With this introduction, I would now request our distinguished speaker, Dr. Sarika A.R., scientist, Kerala Biotechnology Commission, delivered her talk on microbes and infectious diseases, major milestones, and recent threats. Thank you, Dr. Sarika A.R.
Yes, thank you so much, sir, for that wonderful introduction. And before going to current topic, let me take a disclaimer that currently, as sir rightly told, I'm into administration policy making of looking after the biotechnology in the state of Kerala. And what merit I have is that I had been working in microbiology for past, long years, and the strategies with which the scientists were involved in major discoveries and inventions that have been made in the past, that will be dealt with here. So in the midst of this current COVID pandemic, to the microbial agent which is causing the disease and the human host which they infect, and also the human environment which they interact. So when coming to the microbial agent which is involved in causing this disease, that may be due to the mutation, genetic adaptation and the change that is happening each time for a microorganism. And there are also chances of having polymicrobial diseases, which are the secondary infections formed due to a multiple number of bacteria manifestations induced by presence of multiple organisms, which can be otherwise called secondary or complex infections. And again, regarding the human host, there is human susceptibility to infection. Susceptibility varies, as I told here, for COVID-19, age is a factor. And then it depends mostly on the immune system, how much our immune system is able to fight against those infectious agents. And then human demographics and behavior, where they live in, and international trade and travel, how frequently they travel to other countries and all, and also the intentional release of such organisms, which we call as the bioterrorism, and further the occupational exposures and the inappropriate use of antibiotics. So the next havoc that we are going to face is mainly due to the inappropriate use of the antibiotics, where most of our antibiotics will become resistant to, or most of our bacteria or infectious agents will become resistant to the currently applying antibiotics. And also the human environment, the climate and weather, there is global warming and ample environment conditions they are providing for the survival and flourishing of the organisms. And ecosystems are changing, economic development is happening, land use, cutting of forest, technology, industry. Then again, in case of developing countries and underdeveloped countries, there are poverty, social inequality, lack of public health services, animal populations, their change in animal populations, then famine, war, and also finally the lack of a political will. So these are all the factors put together for emergence and re-emergence of new infectious diseases. And when taken into account the leading death cause globally, you can see almost 29% of the global death take place mainly due to the cardiovascular diseases. And just a second to that is the infectious diseases. Almost 26% of the global death, that is due to the infectious diseases. And when taken into account the infectious diseases, how they are causing the mortality, the individual players who that is responsible for causing the death when it comes to HIV, human immunodeficiency virus, which causes AIDS. And also the respiratory infections that remain 30%, though the many organisms are responsible for causing a respiratory infection, a diarrheal disease, and then tuberculosis by a single entity called the Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and then malaria, childhood diseases, and other factors. So these together constitute the global death proportion for the infectious diseases. And coming to the disease patterns of distribution, we have the sporadic, which occurs in a scattered or isolated instances with no connections between them, just like chicken pox. Now the polio, though it has been eradicated, there are instances, maybe instances where isolated cases of having infected with polio virus. And then endemic, where a region is particularly susceptible for a particular disease, which it's a recurring disease, recurs as a regular number of cases in a particular area. And then epidemic, which usually affects a particular area, affects an unusually high number of people in a particular area. And when it crosses the boundaries and spreads to the whole world, it becomes a pandemic, which occurs as a series of epidemics spreading across the continents of the whole world. Right now, we are facing a true pandemic in all the true senses, that is the COVID-19. And regarding the theories of infections, I told since time immemorial, there are infectious diseases. And since antiquity, the origin of epidemics has remained mysterious, and there was no studies, the genuine scientific studies onto that. It was generally accepted that these phenomena were related to miasmas involving the influence of weather and planets. There such a kind of superstitious belief. And during the 19th century, that several observations pointed out the role of germs as a possible cause of disease, which came to the finally led to the rise of germ theory of disease. And the Wikipedia definition for the miasma theory or miasmata theory, is that it's an obsolete medical theory that held the diseases such as cholera, chlamydia, or black death that were the cause of the miasma, a noxious form of bad air, also known as the night air. And this theory held that epidemics were caused by miasma emanating from the rotting organic matter. And this theory was widely accepted from ancient times in Europe and China. And later, the one who challenged this theory was Hippocrates. Several infectious diseases who described Hippocrates or Hippocratic doctor, who no longer believed in magical miasmata that pollute the whole populations, but rather in the concept of contagion. Something is there. I mean, he doesn't specify that to be a germ, but something is there, a concept of contagion that's separating medicine from the superstition. So as we all know, Hippocrates is a great physician, Greek physician, who is known as the father of medicine, and who wrote the Hippocratic Oath. It's a code of conduct for doctors and formed the basis of all medical practice today. And he believed in illness and disease was not caused by evil spirits. And though virus was discovered quite recently, he mentioned about influenza epidemics in his book. And he was. I would also tell you. Would like to tell you that Hippocrates was imprisoned for 20 years for his comments on the disease agents for causing of diseases. That is, as a contagion, he was imprisoned for 20 years, and that time also he didn't waste his time. He wrote a book which is now formed the basis of the modern medicine. And starting from the very primitive disease that has shook the world as the Black Death or the bubonic plague, which originated in the Yunnan province in southwest China in 200 BC, and again spread by Italian merchant ship to Europe in 1300s. And about 200 million people died worldwide, wiped up nearly 60% of the population in Europe. And this is characterized by swollen lymph nodes, which formed bubo, which becomes black, and hence the name Black Plague. So there was lack of knowledge of the germ theory at that time, and also the lack of tools like microscope to be able to identify this particular organism. And again, 5 centuries later, after plague appeared, only with the invention of the microscope that we were able to identify the microscopic organism or the germ as the culprit for this disease. And we celebrate now Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch. Hope as a students of microbiology, you might be familiar with these two names, who have given the major contribution to microbiology, and they assign a specific microbe as a cause of a specific disease. And again, with the outbreak of plague in Hong Kong, Louis Pasteur sent Alexander Yersin to try to identify this germ. And again, through his experiments, he drew fluid from man's bubo and looked it through the microscope. Then microscope was discovered. And he identified the bacterium and found it to be the Yersinia pestis, which is a gram-negative, non-motile, non-spore forming organisms. It's a highly infective organism, and injected the germ in guinea pigs, and the pigs died. And he convinced that this is the right germ which is causing plague. He also checked the dead street rats and found that they also contain the same bacteria. So that's how the bacteria was identified. And how was it transmitted was again found by French physician Paul-Louis Simon. And again, the real culprit was a little flea, which acted as a vector of the disease, which transmitted this particular bacteria from rodents to the humans. And how it became so deadly is that the bacteria can remain live and potentially deadly in a dead body even after 3 days of death. So 80 species, almost 80 species of flea can transmit this particular plague. Hence, it got widespread and given a pandemic. It became a pandemic. Unfortunately, we can cure the disease today by controlling the vectors and by administering the antibiotic in a timely manner. And the cure is almost 85%. The figure shows the bacterium Yersinia pestis and the flea, which act as a vector in transmitting the disease. And then one of the oldest, oldest infectious disease, which is known to mankind, nearly 500,000 old, as the dangerous parasitic disease called the malaria, and that has got a tremendous global impact, which was transmitted by mosquito bite, Plasmodium, which affects the functioning, which affects the functioning of our red blood cells that controls the delivery of the oxygen to the body. And even after these advancements, still it infects one of every 21 human beings, and 300 million humans die yearly, kills nearly 1 million humans annually. And vast majority of global malarial mortality is in Africa. And it was the malarial transmission, the link between the mosquito and the malarial disease transmission was proven at Panama Canal, where it was noted to be a perfect breeding ground for the malaria and yellow fever. The mosquito finds it's a better place for as a perfect breeding ground. And in 1857, that this link was proven. And Dr. William C. Gorgas set out to eradicate the insects by eliminating the standing water and pouring oil onto the immature malarial larvae, and by fumigation of the living spaces. So again, the reason that malaria is so difficult to eradicate is again the continuous cycle of its infection occurring. As you can see in the picture, the first vector, that is the mosquito vector, the Anopheles mosquito, it bites a human host, and then it gets survives in the blood, and blood gets infected. And the second vector again, when bites this human host, it gets again transmitted to the next human host. So it is having a complicated transmission, continuous cycle, and with which it is finding much difficult to completely eradicate the disease. And again, the global warming, so the environmental factors which provide favorable environment for thriving of the malarial parasite, that requires a warm environment. And in spite of the best efforts by World Health Organization to try to reduce malaria, in Africa, one child still dies every minute from malaria. So similar to the antibiotic resistance, the mosquitoes have developed resistance to the treatment drugs, and also seem resilient to widespread pesticide application, even the DDT. Also, the advancements in medicine, we have seen various diagnostic tools and techniques. Malaria continues still to be a deadly disease. And now we know the vector, how it spreads, the cure, but still we are unable to eradicate it. And in the discoveries of the scientists in 1600s, the microscope, Anton van Leeuwenhoek, who was called as the father of microscopy, he first, with using as students of microbiology, this will be their first chapter when you enter into the field of microbiology. The Anton van Leeuwenhoek's discovery of microscopy. He ground polished lenses and seen animalcules, which are seen describing the first bacteria, yeast, the teeming life in a drop of cell, which he called as the animalcules, and the circulation of the blood in the capillaries. Later, Robert Koch, who coined the word cell, he confirmed and improvised the design of the microscope, and these two have contributed immensely to microbiology. And in the 18th century, there were a lot of infectious diseases, and the cure and prevention of disease was desperately needed, and the contagious disease could be particularly devastating. So they had at the time they have seen cholera, smallpox, typhus. They were all present in the 18th century towns, and so the smallpox that was particularly frightening, which will deal quite in a detailed manner quite later. And the mortality was high for infants and small children, especially for diphtheria, smallpox, yellow fever, and malaria. And coming to the smallpox, the organism causing us belong to the family Orthopox virus. It's a double-stranded DNA virus. The virus is called, the two types of viruses involved in causing smallpox, the variola major and the variola minor. Also the cowpox, vaccinia, monkeypox, they are all involved in the orthopox virus family. So the stable outside host, it retains its infectivity even outside the host, and So it was earlier evolved from an African rodent pox virus 10 millennia ago. Didn't have an animal vector, and the name is derived from the Latin word for spotted, refers to the raised bumps, that the sores that we see for a person infected with smallpox. And it's a devastating disease, definitely. And an average 3 out of every 10 people who got it, it died, 30% mortality. And those who survived were usually left with scars, which were sometimes severe. And one of the first methods for controlling the spread of smallpox was use of variolation, which means the technique was named variolation after the virus that caused smallpox. Variolation is the process by which smallpox, that is the pustules, was given to people who had never have had the smallpox. And with variolation, people usually went on to develop the symptoms associated with smallpox, such as fever and rash. However, few people died from variolation than it had acquired smallpox. And later, in 1796, in England, Edward Jenner, who invented vaccination, and he done quite experiments. At that time, it was observed that the cowpox also caused by the virus of the same family. So the milkmaids who was in constant contact with the cowpox virus, they hardly had any smallpox infections. So that observation was actually made. And Edward Jenner inoculated this particular milkmaid's pustule, which is actually the cowpox virus, into a 8-year-old boy, James Phipps. And he again observed for repeated infections, and that boy didn't, in spite of infecting with the smallpox virus, he didn't get the infection. So subsequent variolation of the boy produces no reaction, and thus came the development of vaccine using cowpox, which is protective for the smallpox. And again, then after that, vaccination became widely accepted, and it gradually replaced the practice of variolation. And again, at some point of in the 1800s, the time clearly unknown, the virus was used to make the smallpox vaccine. Earlier, it was the cowpox virus was used, and it changed from cowpox to vaccinia virus, which is a non-variola virus belonging to the same family. And with the coming up of a smallpox vaccine, global smallpox eradication program initiated by WHO in 1959, and which helped in complete elimination of this particular disease from North America and Europe in 1952 to 53, and again intensified eradication program initiated in 1967, which led to eradication in each countries, like in 1971 from South America, 1975 from Asia, 1977 from Africa, and then finally in 1979 it was completely eradicated, and which was officially declared in May 8, 1980 by the 33rd World Health Assembly, that the smallpox is officially eradicated, is said to be endorsed, that it is eradicated from the world. And this eradication of the smallpox is considered to be a major achievement in international public health. And again, yet another disease that shook the world is cholera. Though cholera had been around for many years, the disease came into prominence in the 19th century, and that had a lethal outbreak in India. So almost the 6 outbreaks that we have seen for cholera, that all came from India. And there have since been numerous outbreaks in 7 global pandemics of cholera, the last one being from Indonesia, all the other 6 from India. And each year, cholera infects about 1.3 to 4 million people around the world, killing 21,000 to 1,43,000 people, as per the estimates of WHO. So an Italian microbiologist, the Filippo Paxini, he identified the culprit involved in causing cholera to be a bacterium, cholera bacterium, which is Vibrio cholerae, and he called it, named it Cholerogenic Vibrios in 1854, which was again confirmed by Robert Koch in 1883. So between 1852 and 93, the world saw more cholera pandemics, and the third being the deadliest. It devastated Asia, Europe, North America, and Africa, killing lots of people in Europe, Britain. And in 1854 saw the worst single year hit for the this cholera. So in that year itself, John Snow, who is called as the father of modern epidemiology, he carefully mapped cholera cases in London and allowing to identify the source of disease in the area. And he identified that to be a contaminated water that is responsible for transmission of this particular bacteria and that from a public well pump. And later, we were able to control cholera through fluid replacement and antibiotics, but still they are available, though there are only roughly 65% immunity according to WHO. So there are hundreds of strains are involved in causing cholera, which we call serogroups. And one of the persons who to be remembered who set forth a new era in medicine and biology is Louis Pasteur, and he was involved in, he is a pioneer in setting up major theories which laid the basis of the modern microbiology today. And when long time back, there was the spontaneous generation theory, where it was believed that the living organisms generate spontaneously. And he challenged the 2 millennium old theory of spontaneous generation, and remarkably, using his remarkably well designed experiments, and found out the role of living microbes in the fermentation, putrefaction, which later the technique called as pasteurization. You might be aware of that. Again, his studies on epidemics and silkworms allowed him to demonstrate the role of specific germs, which is involved in causing specific diseases. That finally led to the development of germ theory of disease. And again, his discovery of the vaccine against fowl cholera can be considered as a birth of immunology. And he was also the pioneer in finding out vaccine against anthrax and rabies. So universally recognized through his famous vaccination against anthrax and rabies. And he set up Pasteur Institute in 1888, which set three objectives for the institute. It must be a public dispensary to treat rabies, and a research center for infectious diseases, and a teaching center for studies on microbiology. Again, another one pioneer is the Robert Koch. He's definitely one of the most influential bacteriologists. Discovered the anthrax disease cycle, the bacteria responsible for tuberculosis and cholera. And for its discoveries, he received the Nobel Prize for Physiology in 1905. And he revolutionized the medical microbiology with four postulates, which all the microbiologists should be aware of. The microorganisms or the pathogen must be present in all cases of the disease, and this particular pathogen can be isolated and grown in pure culture, and this should be capable of causing disease when inoculated into a healthy animal, and that particular same organism should be able to isolate from the inoculated, isolated from the new host. And that led to, as I told, these two pioneers' work has given a major boost in coming out of the theory of germ theory of disease, which is the currently accepted scientific theory for many diseases, which states that microorganisms known as the pathogens or germs can lead to disease. And these small organisms, too small to be seen without magnification, can invade humans, animals, and other living hosts. And so germs are responsible for causing an infectious diseases that become evident with this germ theory of disease. And again, poliomyelitis, which infected which started its journey right in the 1700s. In 1789, British physician he first noted this particular disease, and in 1894, the first major documented polio outbreak occurred in the United States, And 1905, its contagious nature was discovered. 1902, two physicians, they discovered that polio is the caused by a virus. And in 1916, the major polio outbreak occurred in the New York City. So that time, the patients suffering from, they had paralytic polio where, they have complications with the lungs and respiration. So again, developed an equipment called as the iron lung that in 1929. And vaccine development started. In 1955, Salk vaccine was developed from the killed virus. And in 1960, Sabin developed a vaccine from a live vaccine. Oral polio vaccine is the Sabin vaccine. And the World Health Organization launched the Global Polio Eradication Initiative in 1988. In 1994, declared eradicated from USA, and in 2012, countries including India, the WHO has declared polio has been eradicated. So again, the discovery of electron microscopy have led to observing the viruses. In late 1800s, researchers hypothesized that a particle smaller than bacteria is causing the tobacco mosaic virus, which they have identified through the filtration, which the bacteria gets filtered onto the filter, but there's something other particle is there which is involved in causing this particular disease. And in 1931, Ernst Ruskov, this mentor Max Knoll, built the first electron microscope, and again we were able to now see viruses through it. And summarize the major pandemic or epidemic that strike right from the 14th century, and the death toll is being shown here. Then cholera, first, second, and third plague, fever, Russian flu, Spanish flu, Asian flu, Hong Kong flu. Then we have seen the emergence of human immunodeficiency virus, which caused acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, and then severe acute respiratory syndrome virus, SARS-CoV. The SARS-CoV, that is the first virus that was found in China itself in 2002. And now the COVID-19, the virus involved in causing the COVID-19 is SARS-CoV-2, which is the second variant of this particular virus. And then Middle East respiratory syndrome virus, then Ebola. Luckily, we have escaped from that particular Ebola outbreak. And then swine flu, right now the COVID-19, still taking as per the estimate 2 years, 2 days back, it has almost crossed 7,74,442 deaths all over the world. And large outbreaks have also been quite recently, as that is due to dengue fever, Rift Valley fever, which is all epidemic, visceral leishmaniasis, diphtheria, hepatitis A, then anthrax, indifferent meningitis, cholera, and hepatitis. So this all happening in some areas around the world. And when we say about the milestones in infectious diseases, this discovery is particularly a miraculous one. The discovery of the antibiotics by Alexander Fleming in 1921 and the streptomycin in 1943. And that paved the way for another era where we have seen the discovery of several antibiotics, starting from penicillin, sulfonamides, aminoglycosides, which the years right from 1920 to 1985 or 87. We have seen discovery of innumerable antibiotics. And there is now a period of the discovery is void even after that, and which has led to another this shows how antibiotics prevent their cell machinery from working, either by disrupting the essential processes or structures in the bacterial cell. They have got the targets, either the cell wall or the membranes that's around the bacterial cell be the target of the particular group of antibiotic like penicillin, and they can also affect the nucleic acid, DNA and RNA. The particular machinery is blocked, and the machinery that produce proteins, protein synthesis machinery, the ribosome and the associated proteins. So this is the mechanism of an action of antibiotic. And now we are facing an important challenge due to antibiotic resistance, which led to the formation of superbugs. That's a major threat to public health all over the world today, the rise of superbug that is very difficult to kill with the antibiotics. So the use and misuse that have created this particular situation, and any kind of antibiotic use in people, animal or plants can promote the development and spread of antibiotic resistance. Also, the antibiotic resistance does not respect geographical or biological borders. The use of antibiotics in one sector, setting or country affects the spread of resistance in others. The misuse that I have known, not only in case of administering it to human beings, even the antibiotics are being used with the animal feeds in order to have a better growth of them. So these are all having very adverse effect on formation of the antibiotic resistant bacteria. And when we see about the deaths which might be attributable to antibiotic resistant due to antibiotic resistance, as per the records of World Health Organization, in 2050 there would be about 10 million deaths due to the microbial resistant bacteria that's going to be prevalent. So the next havoc that we are going to face is due to these antibiotic resistant microorganism that is going to get widely transmitted. And the situation is not quite different from the previous one. We have the population growth, we have industrialization, global trade, biodiversity erosion, and have movements, ecosystem degradation, geopolitical problems. So all these affects all these factors contribute to the re-emergence of infectious diseases. And we have got at the same time we are becoming efficient in most of the usage of most of the technologies, where microbiology is now changing from conventional streaking, culturing of organisms, and then going for the biochemical identification to the amplification, gene sequencing, complete sequencing, 16S rRNA, and the disease-causing genes can be sequenced, etc., etc. So the diagnostic methods, which can be generalized into cultivation, biotesting, the immunological methods like ELISA, then biochemical methods, microscopy, and the molecular methods, which is gaining prominence. And the discovery of the structure of the DNA in 1962, Watson and Crick has got the Nobel Prize for that, and they laid to the path to the molecular medicine. And again, the polymerase chain reaction by the Carey-B-Mullis that has revolutionized the science. Right now, we can see the current diagnostic strategies for COVID-19 rest upon the molecular diagnostic methods using the real-time PCR methods, the PCR techniques. And these are the advancements that we have made in terms of genomics, proteomics, the cell biology. Then the advancements in genomics have led to the development of DNA technology, where we are able to sequence the genomes of bacteria, virus, and other infective agents, and then which helped in the development of chemotherapy and vaccine development. And again, the rapid diagnostics of PCR techniques. And another development is in the mass spectrometry. We are able to identify the microorganisms based on their proteins and peptides nature. And also the antibody testing, antigen testing that currently we hear each day. They're doing the antigen testing, antibody testing. So in short, emerging infectious diseases are recent emerging infectious diseases. We cater to three main groups, like the recent increase in the incidence of geographic host range, like the tuberculosis, cholera, malaria that has already been existing, and new variants of the variants assigned to known pathogens like HIV, new strains of influenza, then SARS, Nipah, Ebola, and recent SARS-CoV-2, and the chances of newly resistant antibiotics like methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus, then vancomycin resistant strains of bacteria. And we have challenges like the overpopulation and urbanization, population movement and animal trade, water sanitation, everything. These are all challenges, drug resistance and livestock production. These are all, and the global warming, like the climatic changes, these are all challenges. And the current trend is a One Health concept where we cater to the all the streams, like development of treatment mechanisms, development of prevention, all are focused on to completely, not just for the human beings, but the environment, animals, and then there is a collaboration. So it was introduced, the One Health concept was introduced at the beginning of the 2000s, and it summarized an idea that had been known for more than a century, that human health and animal health are interdependent and bound to the health of the ecosystem in which they exist. So based on that, this approach has been developed, and it's an approach to design and implement programs, policies, legislation, and research in which multiple sectors, not just a sector, veterinarian, wildlife specialists, medical practitioners, then administrators, politicians, all sit together and find cause to achieve better public outcomes. And the area of work in which One Health approach is particularly relevant includes the food safety, the control of zoonosis, that is the infectious diseases, and in order to combat it, and hence improving the animal and human health globally, and collaboration with all the health science sectors, meeting new global challenges through collaboration, and developing centers of excellence for education. So all should be educated, giving prominence to all the sectors, not just finding out a treatment strategy or prevention for a particular human disease, that a particular organism can be controlled, organs can be controlled in animal, wildlife too. So how this One Health concept, it is this interconnected, that is linked to the antibiotic resistance as in the reduction of the antibiotic use in the food animals. They can cater to the number of organisms getting resistance to new antibiotics. So they are also interconnected. Again, the new strategies that we are developing in terms of therapy, drugs, the new strategies for livestock breeding, all to be targeted towards One Health, like for the healthy animals, then better environment, and then for the humans. So how advancement, this shows how advancement in genomic technologies are assisting their development and enabling more targeted use of antimicrobials. So the current strategy for treatment being the bacteriophage therapy, then antivirulent strategies, and then vaccination, development of vaccine, livestock breeding, microbiota. As we all know, there is huge interest in the studies on human microbiome, because we now recognize that more than the cells of the human, cells in the human body, we have the microorganisms, and how far they are involved, how far they involve in boosting our immune system, that studies are going on. So we have much of an interest in human microbiota. So such studies are also going on. And this is the One Health concept, where towards individual health, again population health and ecosystem health. So you can see the zoonotic infections are all catered to, and also the current comparative medicine and translational medicine, all coming under one umbrella. So with this, I'll conclude. And in 2004, health experts from around the world met for a symposium, and focused on current and potential movements of disease among human, domestic, animal, and wildlife, organized by the Wildlife Conservation Society and hosted by the Rockefeller University. And in that, they came up with a document where it was called as the Manhattan Principles by the organizers of the One World, and that listed 12 recommendations for wildlife conservation, everything like that. And it has the conclusion paragraph like this. It's clear that no one discipline or sector or society has enough knowledge or resources to prevent the emergence and resurgence of diseases in today's globalized world. So no one nation can reverse the patterns of habitat loss and extinction that we have already been taken and do undermine the health of people and animals. So only by breaking down the barriers among agencies, individuals, specialists, and sectors can be unleashed and the innovation and expertise needed to meet the many serious challenges to the health of people, domestic animals, and wildlife, and to the integrity of the ecosystem. So solving today's threats and tomorrow's problems cannot be accomplished with yesterday's approaches. We should have new approaches. We are in the era of one world, one health, and we must devise adaptive, forward-looking, and multidisciplinary solutions to the challenges that undoubtedly lie ahead. So with this, I conclude. I once again thank the organizers for having given me such a wonderful opportunity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Now the session is open for discussion. Audience can clarify.
In the chat box, or you'll ask
Yes,
me?
yes. Audience, please put your questions in the chat box. I think ma'am will answer 3 to 4 questions in short time. Okay.
You have a very short one. The global problem of antimicrobial resistance is particularly pressing in developed countries. Why? So, as we all know, the overseas or the developed countries have got their own strategies for the development of vaccines or drugs. And the problems that the developing countries are facing right now in terms of poverty, then hunger, again, lack of resources, available resources are lacking, infrastructure is lacking, and again, there are some lacking of political will, maybe that is leading to this. And also, in terms of investment, currently, very less amount is being invested for research onto that area. And also our density of population, you can imagine like 6 times outbreak occurs from India, that is for a cholera. So how you can imagine how will be our the surroundings, contamination, everything. So that might be the reason again. And the researchers recently examined that exposure to hyperoxia results in altered microbiome composition in lungs and leads to hyperoxia-induced lung injury. To how extent it affects our immune system in the presence of scenario of hyperoxia results in. I'm not an expert into that area, but to how extent it can affect our immune system. Surely the absence of oxygen can, hyperoxia you mentioned, no? So that can definitely affect our lungs, but how far it affects the immune system, that you may need to ask to some experts. And since the climate is changing, there will be also change in adaptive characteristics of microbes. How will this affect the prevalence of infectious diseases? Yes, as I told earlier, there is a change in climate, as we can rightly see, the global warming, and these provide ample environments for many different infectious organisms to thrive in that particular conditions. And how will this affect the prevalence of infections? Definitely, that can play a major role in prevalence of infectious diseases, rising of new infectious agents. Definitely that can, but that's not sure about, because each organism is having its own environment, its own conditions, ample conditions to thrive. Next.
Okay, that's all.
Okay, okay,
ma'am.
okay.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarika, for the excellent talk, for taking us looking back into the past, and looking into the epidemics and pandemics, and a whole range of scientists who have actually contributed from different areas. I think it was really a great talk, especially helpful to the younger students who should be knowing, like when we teach medicine, the first thing what we take is actually the history of medicine. Actually, this is something which the present group of students are not too interested. Anyway, I think, we said, the speaker has gone very nicely through the past. But, as I said, there are experts, a lot of experts, as I said, be it Paul Nurse, be it Xi Zhenghai, the Batwoman, be it Anthony Fauci, a whole lot of other experts are saying that more of these pandemics are definitely going to come. More of these pandemics are definitely going to come. This is one thing, and the concept what we actually realize, one of the scientists, probably one of the best known immunologists, if you look into Wikipedia, probably the only person of Indian origin is Professor Shankar Ghosh. He's heading the Department of Immunology at Columbia University. Actually, Shankar Ghosh sir actually said, we know more of these microorganisms. The problem is we know about the novel Corona 2 is actually well known. It's 33 kb, it's a positive strand RNA virus, it's known, the proteins, you go to the three-dimensional structure. The problem is not with the virus actually. The problem is what we have seen. How is virus actually interacting with us? Because today Times of India has said, Alua man Pari, the age 103. Is the state's latest centenarian survivor. This man has actually survived. At the same time, the WHO has given a report today which says that pandemic is now driven by younger adults. Actually, both has appeared in today's Times of India. So it's not what there's some questions which actually came up. One was on host gene diversity. Actually, this plays a huge role. Actually, diversity, for example, even if you look at a small concept. For example, if you see diversity, you look at polymorphism in the MHC genes. MHC genes are directly involved in antigen presentation. You have 10,500 of class 1 and 3,500 of class 2. That comes to about 14,000 variants. So how is the antigen presenting variation changing among different individuals? Some are asymptomatic, some are treated at home, some end up in the hospital, some end up in the ICU, some end up in the ventilator, some die. And now we have seen the age group is not too much of a problem, comorbid conditions are. So definitely what we say is there's a recent paper which I said come up from Stanford University, which said the microbiome, because one of the questions was, what happens to the microbiome of the respiratory tract. Actually, 10:1, 90% are microbes. You take especially of the GI tract, respiratory, and the skin. And they have seen what is the problem which is coming up is massive inflammation. What is called a cytokine storm. There's massive inflammation coming up, systemic inflammation. Be it the lungs, be it the kidneys, be it the brain. It's affecting a lot number of cases. So this is actually a big problem. So how it interacts, how is the interaction, as Shankar Ghosh said, it's the interaction between the virus or the interaction between the microorganism and how the body is responding. From immune paralysis, you see a cytokine storm. So the range is that's one. Very interesting, which I have said. The next one was our speaker today spoke on antibiotic resistance. Actually, this is a big topic. This is a big topic. Just before the COVID-19 outbreak, I had the great opportunity to listen to Professor Venki Ramakrishnan, who was a 2009 Nobel laureate in chemistry, though he's done a lot of work on protein synthesis, translation, and the effect of the use of antibiotics. So I did put a question to him. And as he said, we are responsible for a lot of these problems. Because dumping up a lot of these chemicals we don't care a damn for nature. We don't care for the water, we don't care for the air, we don't care for the environment. We started believing we are supreme. And that's actually affecting us in a big way. So antibiotic resistance, that's a big problem. Less amount of money getting into it is a big problem. Anyway, and finally, I would just say another one thing which Paul Nurse said, appreciation of nature. We have to look into nature. As I said, at one end of the spectrum, you have the virus, at another end, you have the photosynthesizing bacteria, and we are at the beginning. So, I would just like to say, we have got hold of a lot of these. We have eradicated smallpox, many of these, even polio 2014, the last case has come. And I just want to say, Jonas Salk had actually visited CMC Vellore Clinical Virology on 1st March 1984. Jonas Salk had come. And actually, he gave us in a speech, he gave a very fine quote, He says, I quote him, "Our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors." I repeat, I quote Jonas Salk, actually involved with the vaccine, starting with Salk Institute. Our greatest responsibility is to be good ancestors. Unless we live harmoniously with the environment, with our with the other fellow living beings, be it plants, be it animals, be it these microorganisms, equations are going to change, and we can expect a lot more. Once again, thanks, for the excellent talk given by Dr. Sarika Iyer, who has taken us through the entire things, new technological advances, and the other things. Once again, Dr. Sarika Iyer, thanks a lot for actually sparing your valuable time and accepting our invitation and coming and giving this fine talk. Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I have also enjoyed a lot. They have interacted well. And thank you for giving that opportunity. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you all. The technical session is over. Okay.